Welcome to the second episode of TelecomTV's new monthly programme, the Open RAN Show, which each month will delve into developments in the Open RAN sector and talk to some of the main people driving the development and deployment of disaggregated multi-vendor radio access networks. I'm Ray Lemaitre, Editorial Director at TelecomTV, and I'm your host for this programme, which looks at one of the most talked about and exciting areas of development in the Open RAN sector, the RAN Intelligent Controller, or RIC. We've got a great lineup in today's show as we have expert commentary from top executives from Vodafone, Deutsche Telekom, NEC, EANTC and Appledore Research, plus a special guest who is well known to TelecomTV viewers, Neil McRae, who may have stepped down from his role as Chief Architect at BT recently, but who is still very much involved in the industry, currently as an independent industry expert, though I get the feeling that might change quite soon. So what is the RIC and why are we talking about it? Well, here at TelecomTV, we regard the RIC as the brain of an Open RAN architecture, as it is the open operating system that can run multiple applications used to monitor and control radio access networks. And it comes in two versions. There's the near real-time RIC, which is for critical, fast response, low latency network control applications, which are known as XApps, that require response times of between 10 milliseconds and 1 second. And then there's the non-real-time RIC, which will run applications known generically as RApps that are responsible for actions that take more than 1 second, such as subscriber data management, quality of experience monitoring, and so on. And from the early days of Open RAN, its supporters have always talked about the innovation that new applications could bring to the RAN if open interfaces enabled third-party applications to be deployed in a best-of-breed technology approach. And the RIC is the platform on which these innovative applications can run. That's the theory anyway, or at least one of them, because not everyone buys into it. But we've already seen some early signs of RIC platform and app development, though it's still very early days for this particular part of the Open RAN puzzle. So in this program, we're asking, is RIC there? Or is this still a nascent development that will only make an impact in a few years' time? So let's start by getting the view from Iago Tenorio, who is a Vodafone Fellow and Director of Network Architecture at the operator, as well as being Chairman of the Telecom Infra Project, or TIP. I asked him if it's fair to consider the RIC as Open RAN's potential hotbed of innovation, and also asked him for his thoughts on some RIC timelines.
I think it's correct in that I think it's the ultimate destination. So RIC is where you get to once you've managed to do everything else right. RIC is a platform and an architecture that it'll be very difficult, if not impossible, for the incumbent architecture to actually match. So eventually Open RAN, will be a big enabler of that platform, and a lot of innovation will be unleashed. So yes, that's right. Now, eventually, RIC will come and enable, new things. There's been trials and interim results as significant as the ones we could see from Cohere, for instance. So their approach to a scheduler is radically different, and they were able to demonstrate significant spectral efficiency gains, which are absolutely stunning. So is that the ultimate destination? Yes. Is that super relevant for Open RAN? Yes, but make no mistake, it's not the only one. There are many more innovations that are gonna happen sooner than that and are happening now. In terms of timing, will we see RIC kind of commercially deployed in volumes in 2023? No, I don't think so. I think it's too early. I think in terms of timing, it's too early to say. We may see it in 24, 25. It'll eventually come, but we need to make sure that we get everything else right and we enable many more kind of innovation fronts before we get to the RIC. That's my view. We need to sort out the system integration and make it available for everybody. We need to work on automation as well. And then eventually RIC will come and make a big difference, but it'll probably be in the second half of this decade, is my view.
So Iago sees a bright future for the RIC, but not for some time yet. And he pointed out in that interview, which you can watch on demand on Telecom TV already, that there are many other areas of innovation, particularly related to chip R&D, happening sooner. Now, at Deutsche Telekom, access network disaggregation lead Franz Seiser has a slightly different perspective, as he sees the different types of RIC evolving at different paces. Here's what he had to say when I asked him when we can expect to see RIC platforms deployed in production networks.
The RIC is the stepping stone or the real game changer in O-RAN, providing all this programmability and automation capabilities we want to see, and here the RIC plays a central role. Now, if you look at the non-real-time RIC, which basically is part of the SMO solution of O-RAN, there is little reason to not expect that happening already this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see quite something in the upcoming big industry event end of next month in that area. So that's pretty clear. The near real-time RIC is still a bit earlier in its development curve, so here I wouldn't expect too much already in deployment in 2023. Here we still have to work to get the APIs right, to make sure the right functionalities are exposed and build the ecosystem around it. So that's still a little bit further out, but as said, for the non-real-time RIC as part of the management solutions, I'm pretty sure we will see quite some announcements and developments already this year.
So, a split timeline, reckons Franz, and that view is shared by Patrick Lopez, Global Vice President of Product Management 5G at NEC.
We're seeing a lot of movement on RIC and a lot of trials, a lot of tests. I think that probably the next Open RAN Alliance plug tests will also see a lot of RIC implementation and XApps and RApps. We think that more likely the non-real-time RIC implementation will be deployed first. Probably we'll start seeing some implementation this year and next year. Where near real-time RIC implementation at scale will probably follow up a little later, maybe at the end of 2024 or the beginning of 2025.
So yes, let's see what happens in 2023 and even what we get to see and hear in Barcelona at Mobile World Congress. Now, before we continue with our focus on the RIC, let's get an update on the latest major news from the Open RAN sector with my colleague, Telecom TV's Deputy Editor, Janetza Bojedzieva. Yanni, over to you.
Thanks, Ray. Orange and Vodafone are building a shared Open RAN network just outside Bucharest, the capital of Romania. The move is part of an agreement to build shared Open RAN-based rural mobile networks in countries where both telcos have commercial operations. The partners say the move will allow them to share hardware components such as radio units and cloud infrastructure, while independently managing their own RAN software on a common cloud infrastructure. At a media and analyst briefing in London, Vodafone unveiled an Open RAN-compatible 5G network in a box that Iago Tenorio, Vodafone Fellow and Network Architecture Director, claims could revolutionize the 5G private networks market. That's because the box is not only the size of a home Wi-Fi router, but it will also cost about the same. The product is said to be the star of Vodafone's stand at MWC23 in Barcelona. In a new white paper published in the run-up to Mobile World Congress, Deutsche Telekom detailed the key takeaways from its recent O-RAN town trial in Neubrandenburg, a town of about 65,000 residents north of Berlin. And despite numerous challenges during the test, the giant German telco reaffirmed its commitment to making Open RAN the technology of choice for future networks. Vodafone, Deutsche Telekom and Orange are among the quintet of major European telcos that has just published a new joint report, putting a strong emphasis on the need for further development of network security functionality and energy efficiency capabilities in Open RAN architectures. The report, titled Open RAN MOU Progress Update on Maturity, Security and Energy Efficiency, was co-authored by Telecom Italia and Telefonica. Mobile network optimization specialist Cohere Technologies has been busy in recent weeks. First, it attracted funding from Bell Canada, which will use Cohere software in its Open RAN trials, and then announced a partnership with Mavenir, which is plugging Cohere's Spectrum Multiplier app into its RAN Intelligent Controller. Mavenir has also been in the news for the launch of that RAN Intelligent Controller platform. Dubbed RIC, the vendor claims it offers capabilities beyond those of existing self-optimized network systems, and says the RIC platform is already in deployment with 2 unidentified Tier 1 telcos. In addition, Mavenir CEO Pardeep Kohli, in a post on LinkedIn, stated that the company generated revenues of about $100 million from its Open RAN technology sales in 2022. Christian Toivo, Managing Director of the Telecom Infra Project, or TIP, was in London recently to discuss how the industry body is aiming to get its hands on some of the Open RAN-focused funding up for grabs in the US. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, has earmarked $1.5 billion for Open RAN ecosystem expansion in the US. But TIP is not alone. Almost 90 companies have submitted comments to the NTIA to help it decide how to allocate the funds. And finally, Saudi operator Zain KSA has announced an expanded collaboration with wireless chip giant Qualcomm to plan the deployment of cloud-native, virtualized and Open RAN-based mobile networks. The collaboration will focus on 5G networks of the future using Open RAN technology and make cellular infrastructure more innovative, competitive and cost-efficient, according to Qualcomm. Back over to you, Ray.
Thanks very much, Yanni. Yep, there's a lot going on in Open RAN and quite a bit related to the RIC there too. But current developments are, as mentioned, the early moves of the RIC vanguard. But why is this part of the sector still at such an early stage? Is it a lack of agreed specifications, not enough demand from operators? Well, for Francis Haysom, Principal Analyst at Appledore Research, the hold-up in the development of RIC platforms is not so much the evolution of the technology, and more about the immaturity of the ecosystem and the development of the life cycle management of RIC operations.
I don't think the technology is actually hugely a difficulty with the RIC. We're used to controllers already controlling a lot of the other aspects of networks, and RAN, the intelligent controller, is just another aspect of that one. Again, I think the challenge here is the ecosystem and how telcos can procure that ecosystem. It's great to talk about innovation, but at the same time, if we take the RIC as an example, this idea of pluggable applications that will go into the RIC, that will change characteristics of the RAN, that's both an innovation, exciting thing. It's also something that is deeply scary to the operational processes of a telco today. The idea that there is software controlling the way, dynamically controlling the way, coming from third-party applications is a slightly scary risk, seen as a risk to the industry. And so a lot of the aspect is not to do with technology here. It's to do with creating the ecosystems, creating the life cycle management, which allows telcos to understand this risk can be managed, and this risk can be managed in a way that enables the innovation. But that's going to take more than a year.
And for Carsten Rossenheuvel, Managing Director and co-founder of EANTC, the European Advanced Networking Test Centre, integration will be a major challenge. He notes that using software to manage a radio access network is not a new approach, as self-organizing network, or SON, software has been around for a while, so a lot will depend on exactly how much added value the RApps and XApps can deliver.
Integration is the main challenge, and integrating the XApps and RApps into a RIC, which then integrates into an Open RAN network, that's like a double integration challenge, which doesn't make it easier. So on the other hand, SONs have been up before, like self-organizing networks. The function of optimizing the network, the radio resources, has been around in proprietary environments from the big legacy vendors for years. And so the industry is quite knows this problem and knows how to solve it. And we just have to see in how far the XApps and RApps will bring added value to the network. So for example, in Europe, the energy efficiency is quite a big concern right now because the cost for electricity is skyrocketing. And the question is, can a complex XApp or RApp scenario actually bring more value than just doing some static planning of resource usage of base stations over time and then just switching them off in the most dumb way every night at 2 a.m. and switching them back on at 6 a.m. So we have to see where the optimization promises are actually going to be fulfilled. But I think where they can be fulfilled, there's a great potential future for the RICs.
So speaking of self-optimizing networks, that's a topic I'm going to discuss now in our RIC-focused panel discussion with NEC's Patrick Lopez and Neil McRae, whose current digital business card sports the job title Distinguished Telecommunications Expert. So, gentlemen, welcome to you both. Thanks very much for joining us. Patrick, let's start with you. The RIC, specifically the near real-time RIC, has often been referred to as the next generation of SON, or self-organizing network solutions. Is that a fair comment, or is the RIC a different beast from the SON?
It's certainly the ancestor, let's say, of the RIC, in the sense that if you think at the beginning of self-organizing networks, the idea was to create a way to basically optimize in real time the radio signal and to allow a network that is composed of various carriers and various antennas to behave as one system, and basically to balance capacity and to balance signal as it was needed. That's extraordinarily complex, and the implementation of SON in the past have been fairly designed for specific vendors. What RIC is trying to achieve is basically the generalization of those principles by enabling a true multi-vendor self-organizing network, and by implementing basically advanced AI ML capabilities in order to balance and optimize this traffic in real time. But that's not all that RIC is doing. There's a lot of innovation as well that is being poured into RIC, and the creation of apps that are not only optimizing, but also creating new slices, creating optimization from not only a traffic perspective, but also from a power consumption perspective. So there's a lot of innovation and advancements that are being brought into RIC that expand, if you want, the original SON idea.
Okay, thanks. And Neil, how do you see the comparison between the RIC and SON solutions, which of course have been around for a while already?
I kind of agree very much with what's been said. I think for me, SON was the first generation of trying to do more than leverage the information in the network. I think the RIC, it's very different in what it tries to do, but we've learned from SON. There are certain things that SON does, but it does it at a very high level. It does it at a very pre-programmed level. It's not as real time as really you need it to be, especially in today's world where you've got all sorts of different traffic profiles on the network. So I kind of look at where I think SON and RIC is probably the closest is around the optimization area, which is what SON was really focused on. But what we see in RIC now is it being used as a source of intelligence for that ML AI, not just in the local region, but actually learning from something in perhaps one part of the network and using what it learns there to optimize things in another part of the network. Also, it's about interfaces, and what we also really have to remember about the RIC is the RIC has got kind of two faces to it in many respects. It's got the open interface that faces the radio platform, but it's also got the open interface that faces the kind of applications platform, and it acts as kind of like a linchpin between the applications that people are creating and the actual network capabilities as well. And then really the other big difference, and I think mentioned already, is granularity. The RIC has the potential to really go to the finest grain of detail if need be, whereas SON was never really defined for that. Policies, I mentioned this, SON is very much a pre-populated policy, not really easy to change, at the click of a finger, whereas certain parts of the more near real-time RIC will do much more almost instantaneous changes to the network. And then finally, I think one of the biggest things for me personally is how well is it performing for customers? And the RIC is going to give us a huge amount of telemetry intelligence, not just from the network components, but also potentially from how the UEs are interfacing to the network and optimizing for those different smartphones, robots, trains, whatever the device is that's carrying a cellular or a mobile network need.
Okay, so a real sense of advancement here over those SON systems. And there's an important angle to the RIC systems that we're seeing coming to market right now, in that while their development is very tightly associated with Open RAN, these platforms can also be used to manage existing non-Open RAN deployments. Is that correct, Neil? Is that an application for these systems?
Absolutely, and I think some operators are doing that. There's an operator here in the UK that's doing that. I know of a few operators in Germany and in Spain that are looking at that, because the reality is, Ray, we're going to have legacy networks for probably 10 years. So if we're going to see the benefits, we've got to find a way of bridging that. And for me, I look at this. I saw a question recently: is SDN dead? In my mind, RIC is like the core of a software-defined network, and will allow you to interface to different types of network, perhaps with different limitations. Legacy networks may not have the same flexibility that new modern networks have. But even in the simplest form, even in trying to understand the performance or power utilization, or being able to turn down power, even simple things like that, the RIC's definitely going to help with that. So in my mind, I think we're going to see, from an Open RAN point of view, I'd be most excited about the RIC. I've talked about it a lot, and I think we're going to see many, many innovations come from the RIC. And in my mind, probably, 5 years from now, we'll be looking back, and most of what we'll be thinking about in Open RAN and RAN generically, I believe the RIC will be really driving that, or be the leading thing that's really made all the work that's going on actually deliver a much better experience for customers.
Okay, excellent. And Patrick, do you think this broad role for the RIC will help the associated ecosystem develop more quickly?
Yes, I think, generally speaking, having open interfaces to these elements help tremendously, because it creates basically entry point for a number of companies to start developing applications without having to develop the platform itself. And really, from my perspective, the real opportunity with RIC is not the RIC platform itself, it's the apps that are going to be developed on top of it. And if the RIC platform and its interfaces are open, it allows third party to come in and to create value with their own knowledge and skill set that might not be generic RIC for all the network, but might be for specific use cases, for specific devices, but they will be helpful nonetheless. An important point of RIC is also that you have a lot more granularity and the capacity to act in near real time. Now, the RIC is composed of two elements, actually, a non-real time and a near real time, and it allows to provide, if you want, optimization at the network level, as well as optimization at the site or at the carrier level. So you have a lot of granularity there. At last, NEC has joined force with an Irish company called Aspire Technology that has been a pioneer in network optimizations. And since last year, Aspire Technology is now providing its capabilities to NEC as well in terms of bringing optimization of legacy network together with the RIC to enable basically optimization of networks that are brownfield with new elements, with older elements in a multi-vendor environment.
Okay, interesting. And you touched on the various applications there. So what about the X apps that run on the near real-time RIC and the R apps that will run on the non-real-time RIC? Is there a lot of interest in developing applications that can run on this multitude of RIC platforms? Are you seeing this kind of activity from the developer community already? Patrick, let's start with you.
Yes, absolutely. I think that as we see RIC platforms emerging, we start to see also an ecosystem of developers that is being brought to bear and that are proposing specific apps, either for non-real-time or near real-time. Obviously, the near real-time RIC requires deep knowledge of the radio access network capabilities, of the radio capabilities, and the CUDU themselves. So they're usually brought forward by specialist companies, whereas the R apps that sit on the non-real-time RIC, which sits in the service management and orchestration layer, are more generic and more open to a lot of companies that have been doing traffic optimization in the past. So we're saying a lot of companies that were not really involved in the RAN until now bringing solutions to the RAN through the implementation of X apps and R apps.
Okay, that's great to hear. And Neil, do you think the emergence of RIC platforms will encourage new companies to develop specific tools for RAN environments and encourage innovation, or is that just a bit of wishful thinking?
Look, I think for me, I think if you look at what's the easiest route for network vendors or algorithm type companies into telecoms, the RIC is the hotspot for them. There are many companies out there that have got fantastic knowledge and capability and optimization and understanding patterns and what those patterns mean. And we see it across the network vendors. One of the strongest RICs out there right now, I would say, is the one that Juniper Networks have been working on. They're not known for being in the RAN space at all, so it's great to see them coming into this space and really engaging. Lots of other companies, new startups appearing in this space as well. Also being able to bring in, kind of the maths experts from academia to kind of look at what the art of the possible is in the network and be able to share data and continually learn from it, I think is another way. I think the open interface, I want to be slightly careful about the open interfaces though. Don't get me wrong, open interfaces are great, they're helpful. But during my kind of holiday period that I'm on right now, I've been to quite a few Open RAN sessions, and what's clear to me is even though those interfaces are open, the functionality between components of the network don't always work in the same way. So yes, it's helpful, but I think there's much more to do for companies, especially new companies coming in. There's probably a heavy learning curve that they have to go through to then actually be able to translate what they believe they can do into reality. And I think network operators and network vendors need to give those companies time and space to effectively fine-tune how their platform works across the Open RAN ecosystem. What I'd really like to see is a kind of de facto standard of Open RAN across every device. Many people ask me why was the internet so successful? Actually, because nearly every routing part of the internet was based on Unix or BSD, so all interrupt really well. If we had something similar in Open RAN, I think we'd see the pace of it move much quicker. And I think particularly in the RIC, where there is interest from new companies, we've got to figure out how we make it a safe place for them to land and get the most out of them. Otherwise, I fear, we might have a lot of hype, and then actually what translates into reality, I think a lot of operators are looking for quick wins. The radio network's 10-year cycle platform, we've got to give these things time to mature and deliver the benefits that I think we can all see, and I think that we all feel day to day when we use our phones out and about in the real world.
Okay, well, a good pointer there for the specification groups. And I get the feeling that particularly the second half of 2022, that was a real strong learning curve time for the industry, and they've come back with a lot of thoughts and more tests and plans going forward. So finally, what would you like to see happen that could accelerate development of the RIC ecosystem in the industry? How can things be moved along a bit quicker? Neil, let's come to you first, and then we'll come to Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe gave the answer to that a bit earlier in the last question. I think getting more open source code out there, even if it's not the production code, but actually code that people can trial and test their code against, I think would be massively helpful. I think we still need more support from the network vendors themselves in terms of not just publicizing against the Open RAN interface standard, but also understanding some of the detail and, okay, if you're going to send us this signal, this is what you can expect, I think would help a lot. But then I think the other thing, looking at it from the vendor side, and I think I often always looking at it from an operator side. If I look at it from the vendor side, I think sharing more data from the network with vendors and academia and many of the projects that are around Open RAN, we have literally thousands of them here in the UK, but I know there's even more across Europe and across the whole world. Being able to share data with those organizations building RIC apps will again allow them to build them more accurately and more carefully, and also being really clear about what we want. I think one thing I would be shouting loud for right now is managing flash crowds. We still struggle with that, even in 5G. We're still struggling with it. So how do we frame that in a RIC solution, that when a crowd of people suddenly turn up for whatever reason, that they're all getting the same experience that they should be getting, and that there's no extra pressure on the network that's affecting customers somewhere else. So that would be one of the things I'd be looking for. But I think there's a lot going on in this space, but I think it's all about collaboration, sharing data, being specific about what we want, but also being clear about what happens when you do certain things with certain parts of the network infrastructure. Okay, interesting, and a good example there of something that developers can get hold of that would be useful for operators. And Patrick, finally, what do you want to see next from the RIC community that could help to bring developers in, move things on a bit faster?
There is a need for providing more data. Simply put, a lot of the apps rely on complex algorithmics. And the algorithm, in order to be fine-tuned, have to be trained. And there's only so much training that can be done with synthetic data. At the end of the day, having access and being able to look at live traffic data allows a better training of the algorithms, which allow for a more efficient platform and more efficient apps. So that's one part of it. One thing I'd like to add, maybe going back to the answer a little earlier about the companies that are emerging in the RIC space, is also we see at NEC operators actually for the first time actually hinting at developing apps themselves because they have those data. They're starting to have the knowledge and skill set in-house to be able to develop some of these algorithmics. And there's certainly a strong interest in basically optimizing and tuning their network. And they know their network better than anyone else. They don't want to necessarily subcontract to third party the optimization of their network capabilities. And in that space, I think that's where we'll see a lot of growth in the coming years. I think operators will want not just to buy a platform and third-party elements, but they want to be able to be involved in the tuning itself and understanding how the algorithmics work and how to make it better for their own network experience. I think these are the elements that are going to accelerate the RIC implementation going forward.
Okay, a fantastic point to end on there, Patrick. And like you said, I'd be very surprised if we don't see some app development from the operator community. And I'd be very surprised if a company like NTT Docomo, for example, which is a very close partner of NEC, wasn't coming to market with something that they could use themselves and maybe share with others. So thank you both for your insights, fantastic ideas, fantastic examples, and given us a lot to think about today. Thanks very much for your time. Well, great discussion there, but that's all we have time for today. The next episode of the Open RAN show is in late March. So in the meantime, if you have any hot Open RAN insights, news or gossip, please get in touch with the TelecomTV team via the usual channels or alternatively by carrier pigeon. Thank you and goodbye.